I know you are going to deliver presents, but I need just like 5 minutes. I need to bounce some ideas off for the Christmas Eve serving.
I guess I can do that.
Okay,
good. The kids can wait for their presents.
Yeah, good. So, I'm thinking about starting with the idea of Christmas memories.
I think that's a great idea. Christmas Eve memories are one of those things that keep people coming back year after year.
Yeah, and I was wondering if you can maybe share with me what's a Christmas Eve memory that you have?
There's so many, obviously, but one happened, not in a church setting. I was my last year of seminary at school, and we have a Christmas party, because we can't be with each other on Christmas Eve because everybody's at different churches. And so we're there singing songs, with friends, and all these kind of things, not knowing where any of us are going to end up. But singing Silent Night, the last song, with candles, and that memory, the light and just the friendship.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you know what my favorite memory is? The 6 of us, my mom, my dad, my brother and sisters and me, we were all in the pew together on Christmas Eve singing the Christmas Eve hymns in harmony. Now, my family had its share of dysfunctionalism. Most of the time, all we did was fight with each other. But on this night, no matter what happened the rest of the year, even no matter what happened on that day, when we walked in the door, we put aside everything and picked up our hymnals, and we each sang our part.
But you sang in 4-part harmony.
No, we sang in 6-part harmony. Even with my sister Ivy Jo gone now, I can still hear all of us, our voices blending together with that beautiful Christmas music. And we would sing, just like your friends would do, we would sing Silent Night. And the pastor that I used to work with in my previous church, pastor, he would hold up the candle on the last verse, and the whole congregation would raise their candles with him.
I'm sure everybody in the congregation has some kind of memory like this about that Christmas. And all these memories revolve around that Christmas gospel. And what amazes me about this is the story, and in the fact that we even know about it after all these years.
That's true. Think about it. Mary was nobody special. There were thousands of young women just like her, and she receives this message from God that she is to conceive and bear a son by God's own miracle. But on the surface, that's really not good news, because here she is, young girl, pregnant, out of wedlock, a disgrace to her family and her fiancé, and yet she chose to accept this as good news from God. That is amazing.
Right, and I always think about Joseph, the dream in which the angel tells him to go ahead and take Mary as his wife. On the surface, obviously, it's not good news. He's facing shame and ridicule of his community, engaged to this young girl who's carrying a child that she says was given to her by God. Right. It would have been so much easier to just quietly dismiss her and separate himself from Mary and have only himself to think about.
And yet, just like Mary, he chose to accept this as good news from God. It's amazing.
Right. For me, the turning point, it's really when the angels appear, saying, "Do not be afraid."
Yeah, that's true. Because, they appeared to the shepherds on that hillside. And just like Mary and Joseph, these shepherds are a bunch of nobodies.
Right. We don't even know their names. They're just a ragtag band of shepherds.
They're like the refugees of today, or the migrant workers. People look down on them. People look down on shepherds as dirty and untrustworthy, and they're kind of stuck in this caste system where they're on the lowest rung, and their whole lives are basically filled with nothing but bad news.
Right, and yet God chose them, those people, to receive the news. And I cannot imagine what Mary and Joseph would have thought, hearing these shepherds, these ragtag band of people, confirming what they had heard on their own, that this child, Jesus, was to be the child of the world, and hope.
Yeah, hope. Hope was in short supply in those days. They were oppressed by the Roman government. Civil unrest and violence could break out at any time. It must have been a very fearful time for them.
Right, and that's what's key to the message. Every single time the angels appear, first to Mary, Joseph, and then to the shepherds, they always say, "Do not be afraid."
Do not be afraid. So The Christmas story is about hope and fear. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's like the line from the hymn of O Little Town of Bethlehem. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight.
Ah, yeah. You know, if you think about it, every Christmas Eve is like that. The hopes and fears of all the years are converging on Christmas Eve in our hearts, in our church, all around the world. It's a very sacred time.
Right. You know, maybe that's what you should talk about in your sermon for Christmas Eve, our hopes and fears.
Oh, that's good. I write that down. And you know, we always think about hope being grounded in the future. But what did Mary and Joseph and the shepherds have to go on except the stories they heard from the past? I mean, I think our hope is really grounded in the past.
Yeah, I mean, look at the stories. Look at Abraham and Sarah. No hope of ever having a child, and yet God gives them a child.
David and Goliath, no hope of defeating a giant warrior, but one fling of the sling, and Goliath is gone.
Exactly. And it's obviously not just in the Bible that this happens. We think of contemporary times. Nelson Mandela, forgotten in prison for 20 years, and suddenly he becomes the president of South Africa.
The Berlin Wall, in place for 40 years, comes down like the walls of Jericho without a shot being fired.
Exactly. Our hope, like Mary and Joseph, is grounded in the past.
Now that's why this story is so amazing. These angels carry the message of God's hope to everyone in the story, saying to Mary, the child you carry is the Messiah.
And Joseph, the woman and child you care for, hold the hope of the world.
Shepherds, the baby born in Bethlehem, will speak on behalf of the poor who are just like you, lifting them out of misery and into dignity as beloved children of God.
And they're in the very midst of their fear, being reminded by the angels that they themselves carry the hope of the world.
So, if the angels gave them all reason to hope, what are we so afraid of?
I mean, we're so often trapped by our own fears. Just look at Christmas shopping. I'm sure many of us have already finished that, but of course there's a part of gift giving that's really good because it comes out of generosity on us. But there's also a part that's based on fear. Fear of what our worth is related to how much we can give or how much we can get. That's the measure of how we show our love. We worry that if we don't give enough or get enough, that we don't measure up. We spend money in gifts and give gifts based on our fears.
And you know, on a deeper level, I think about the fears surrounding us. The fear of terrorism, the fear of racial tensions, the fear of what's happening environmentally on our planet.
And yet, I have to believe that somewhere in the midst of all this, God is working God's own purpose for our world. We have a history of a God who consistently overcomes the fears of the world and our own personal fears and gives us that hope to go on with our lives today, facing whatever tomorrow is going to bring.
Yeah, that's exactly why the words of the story keep us coming back. They ring true year after year, decade after decade. People keep flocking to church to hear these words. Do not be afraid. We hear this story and we realize that we hope because God is with us.
Right, and we have this whole history of God overcoming fears that our hopes are realized.
I think that hope is what brings people here on Christmas Eve.
Right, the darkest time of the year is when God brought the light of the hope into the world.
And yet people need that reassurance that the God who created you still loves you, still waits for you, still has something to give you that will transform your fear into hope. Hope is what reached into the world on that first Christmas morning.
Right, and hope is what stretched her arms across your family in that pew on Christmas Eve and sang along with you.
And hope is what spread her arms around you and your friends as pastors preparing for ministry. And hope is what lifted the arms of my pastor when he would hold that candle in the darkness on Christmas Eve in church.
Maybe this Christmas Eve we should do that. Raise our candles on that last verse.
Like that.
Silent night, holy night, Son of God, love's pure light.
Radiant beams from thy holy face, with the dawn of redeeming grace.
That's hope, shining in the darkness.
That's good. You know what? I think we have our Christmas sermon here.
Yep, because this is what Christmas is all about.
The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. Amen.